Men of Reddit, what are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? I lived in a pretty rich area of the Bay Area. My GF at the time was very rich for this already wealthy area, but she truly had no concept of money. Her budget was $12,000 a month. Her family bought her a brand new Porsche because her car was 5-year-old BMW M5. It was honestly like dating an alien. Any issues I had in everyday life were just so far out of her life experience. Edit. She had a trust fund that paid out $12,000 a month. Edit 2. If I had $10 for every person asking if she is single still, and if they could have her number, I would have a trust fund of my own that pays out $12,000 a month. Everything was about the family's image. Everything. Didn't last long. Keeping up with her. She wanted to go on European trips, expensive vacations, expensive restaurants, etc. She made very good money, and I was limited in my funds, and had to spread it out. I couldn't just fly to the Caribbean at the drop of a hat. So, in turn, she left me for a guy who could. Edit. Wow, that took off. I wasn't expecting to hear from so many people. Thanks you all. The thing is that I have money, a great career, etc. We dated for 2+ years, and had a great time while together, and did a lot stuff. As a matter of fact, she was probably the best GF I had ever had, but the underlying thing was that no matter what I always felt this feeling of not being enough. She doubled my salary, if not a little more, in the 6 figures. In the end she admitted to wishing I had more financial freedom, and that it bothered her. It hurt like hell to hear something so personally insulting from someone I loved. So she found someone who was in her tax bracket, so to speak. Admitting financial struggles. When my wife and I were dating in university, her family invited me up to their cottage during the break between Christmas and New Year's to ski, skate and otherwise play in the snow. I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to ski, and had no outdoor clothing appropriate to be out in the snow, no ski jacket, pants, or boots. I declined the invitation, but my then girlfriend was really sad and asked why. I had to admit I didn't have the gear needed, and I couldn't afford them. She then passed it on to her family, and when I visited them on Christmas Day, they led me to a room with 3 types of everything new with tags, laid out on a bed for me to choose from. It was a wonderful gesture, but I had mixed feelings. I appreciated the gear very much, but I felt like a charity case. Also, managing expectations of my wife for travel and expectations with children's activities. She was used to jetting away whenever they felt like it, and had her own horses growing up. That's just not an option for us. We do okay and we are happy, but horses are not financially viable. I guess I had a different type than everyone else. We worked together, and you wouldn't know she was rich unless you really got to know her. She worked as a diversion, something to do, and meet new people. She never looked at the price of anything, had a $5,000 watch, Dolce & Gabbana glasses she would break at least once a month cause she's clumsy. Very humble, very sweet, and probably the hardest worker there. We were managers. The issue was that there was absolutely nothing we could do together that was new to her. She had more money and free time. Her bucket list was completed by 22. There was nothing new or fresh within my, I don't know the word, realm, ability. We got along great, and I found out from a mutual friend she was excited to be with someone not using her or groveling cause she was levels of rich. It was my pride I think that ruined it, nothing she did. I had issues letting her pay for everything, and I was unable to show her anything she hadn't seen. I stopped being fun because I couldn't wow or impress her, and it got in my head. She was perfectly happy doing normal things, but it wasn't enough for me. I had to impress her. We lost contact years ago. I hope she's doing well. She was king awesome and deserves to be happy. If you're coming from a very poor family, as was my case, expect a lot of butting of heads when it comes to financial issues. I was raised very poor. Now I make a decent amount of money, but if I'm ever in a situation where I have a lot of expenses and may run into financial issues, I tend to panic a little bit and plan my spending extremely carefully. My wife came from a wealthy family and she never had to deal with financial struggles at any point in her life, and she doesn't quite care about spending a lot of money. Basically she doesn't think past the fact that we can afford something. She doesn't think about possibly needing money in the future, and that's where we always heads. In short, make sure you ask her to let you know before she spends more than X amount. That was the solution we came up with, and it has actually saved us from a lot of financial trouble. Spending should be a thing you both agree on, otherwise it's not going to work out. I dated a senator's daughter in high school. Everything was about keeping up appearances, and we had to be careful where we went in public and stuff like that. Her parents offered to get me nicer clothes to wear when we went to dinner in public, but I felt weird about it. Relationship didn't last long. I'm not good at being political. My roommate was very wealthy and her boyfriend ended up living with us for 2 years, and I remember they would have the same fights all the time. He came from a very poor household, tough family life, in a not so great area of the city, didn't graduate high school, etc. He was supporting himself working as a bartender. Compared to his childhood financial situation, he viewed supporting himself with a steady job as being successful, whereas she was always wanting him to do more, be bigger, etc. They also fought a lot over birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, etc. She would buy him really expensive gifts that he needed, but couldn't afford to buy himself. He needed new winter boots and a coat, so she would buy him really nice ones for Christmas. A good coat and boots with 1 or 2 other items can easily get close to $500 to $600. He could never get her a gift of such magnitude. She was somewhat understanding that he couldn't pay for something like that, but he used to tell me he always felt a lot of pressure to match her really expensive gifts with really creative ones. He said he would dread holidays, Valentine's Day and birthdays, because he would get so stressed out trying to constantly think of creative ways to match her really expensive gifts. It seemed to me like he was getting really bitter about having so much stress over creating a gift versus her being able to spend 5 minutes using her parents' money to get him something. I think it was also tough because she wanted to do so much stuff and had the financial security to do it. She wanted to travel a lot, and he just couldn't afford it. She would pay for him sometimes, but that bothered him. I met up with them once when I was living in Thailand, and she kept using phrases like, "This is so cheap for." Like she would insist we got to the most expensive restaurants in the area, because a comparative restaurant in the States would be way more expensive. She also had a massive inheritance. She doesn't have access to it till she's 35, but he used to tell me he was so bitter that he would probably have to work his whole life until he was dead and would probably never make enough to really retire, whereas she could basically stop working at 35 if she wanted. They dated for 4 years, but it eventually fell apart. She was always doing something. Constantly going on trips, or to the openings of expensive restaurants, or traveling to her parents' vacation house, or getting tickets for some opening night or something. It was frankly exhausting. She had money and she wanted to spend it, and I just couldn't keep up. I say had, because it was entirely her parents' money. She was in grad school, though she was struggling at it, and otherwise had absolutely no work or experience. Outside of a restaurant, she barely had any life experience either. Let me tell a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or when they would come to visit their kids at school. By all accounts, Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back. Not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport, think Cessnas, and the closest major airport is several hours away by car, and neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and grandpa were very close, and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word, Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe and my friend and her family were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went, and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other, and neither did Joe. They are now married, and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell live a very normal life. But every once in a while they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year, and don't tell anyone but their family where they're going. I was an aspiring lawyer and she an aspiring artist. She came from a rich family and I grew up in a bad social economic area. My parents were refugees back in the 70s. Basically never knew how rich she was until I went to her hometown for her brother's wedding. Apart from the amazing apartment her parents had, they had an empty apartment in the downtown area for guests that I could sleep in. Easily the fanciest place I've stayed at. Oh, and her older brother, that was in the family business, had to go to the factories they owned to do something. Relationships started to take a hit when her dad blamed me for his daughter's dreams of being an artist. I only made her believe in herself and to choose her destiny herself instead of letting her parents force her into the family business. She changed her major from business management to art without me knowing, and her parents freaked out and blamed me for it. I couldn't really handle the drama and law school, so we ended things. Last time I checked her out she was in an art school somewhere in Europe. Seems like she's still living the dream. Edit. Just to clarify, I didn't wanna break a happy home or anything. My ex had severe anxiety and depression about her major that her parents chose for her. She was never happy at uni and that's why we talked about her choosing her own life. I dated a pretty rich girl. Her dad was a prominent lawyer, her mom a successful artist, and her uncle was a 1980s pop star. Honestly, they were great people to be around. They were old money, and not snotty or overly pretentious. Yes, they had a big ass old house and drove quality, not overly flashy, cars. Yes, they had whatever they wanted, but not at all in a look at me type way. I on the other hand was dirt poor. I mean in the early 90s grunge was a blessing for me, because I looked like that already. But her parents didn't care, and we are always very welcoming. Her mom even took me to my first punk show. I guess it's true when they say cash screams and wealth whispers. I can't say very rich, but my wife and I definitely come from different socioeconomic castes. Her family was upper middle class, and mine was just above poverty level. She just didn't understand the panic I felt when money was running low. She didn't know the dread you get when your car starts making a strange noise and you know you can't afford to fix it. For her, everything would work out because she had parents with money to swoop in and make it all better. In short, she never understood the struggle and wasn't very smart with her money. It's not even that she wasn't smart, it's that she wasn't the same sort of ingenious that poor people are with stretching every penny. Eventually, we both got decent jobs and managed to put back a good savings, and we both grew to understand each other's money habits. I dated a girl from a wealthy family when I was in college, and I was very poor. The most frustrating thing for me was that our definition of a crisis was so different. From month to month I would literally not know whether I could afford my rent or be able to put gas in my car, and she would be freaking out about some, to me, minor social issue, or whether a store carried a fashion brand she liked. It definitely made things difficult, and I had to remember that it's your perspective that dictates what is a crisis and what isn't. It was honestly a lesson I've tried to remember over the years. Girl or boy, their most realistic fear is that anyone who shows interest in them is doing so only because of their money. That's why the more well off someone is, the more low-key they are about it. Those who aren't low-key get devoured by human sharks very quickly.